I think the public tends to speak for the guys.
Yeah.
Completely erroneously. I think the public,
In what way?
I think the public speaks for, oh, well, so-and-so wouldn't like that event. So-and-so wouldn't like this event. So-and-so, that's unfair to them because of this event. You know what? If you were to ask so-and-so about that event that you, the public, are saying is unfair to them, because that guy will tell you to shut the hell up. He can't wait to prove you wrong.
Welcome to the Shawstring Podcast. I am joined today by Mr. Nathan Payton. And Nathan, man, how do I even introduce you, man? It's the diet wizard. Nathan, for so many years, starting in 2011, helped me out with my diet and, got me dialed in for contests and went through all the different, changes that I went through and kind of my diet evolution in a lot of ways. And within the sport of strongman, like how things changed and we had to adapt. But man, it's good to have you here.
It's great to be here. It's always good to be around you and reminisce just some of the stories that we've gone through. The more you think about it, it's like, holy cow, there's been some stuff in all that time.
There 100% has, 100% has. So we will get into all that. I want you to go through your background a little bit for people that aren't, super familiar, how you got started with this. Maybe why you're passionate about it, and because it's a different, path that you've gone down to get to where you are. And I think that will, help obviously introduce people to you more, but, just give a basis of where you're coming from and why you're fascinated by this stuff too.
Absolutely. So kind of where it all originates from, and then we'll kind of swish into some of the background stuff. So like anyone, I think, I grew up watching World's Strongest Man with my dad around the holidays. So that was always a big thing. You always watched at the time ESPN, so you always watched it. There was World's Strongest Man. My dad would always say, let's watch the guys pick up the rocks,
It's a good way to summarize it. Yeah.
And that's how you knew it was the holiday season. My dad was, I would say, my first strength. My dad was the first person that I ever became aware of people are stronger than other people. My dad was a big guy. He had very large arms. He was a transmission mechanic. He owned his own shop. And as well as anybody, when you're your own businessman, you work when you're sick, you work when you're sore, you work when anything, you just work. And that was my dad. So constantly working, but huge arms, very strong. He'd yank a transmission out of a vehicle, pick it up and carry it across the shop to where he had to work on the thing, because he couldn't afford, the jacks and the lifts. Plus that stuff didn't really exist back then too much, but just incredibly strong man. And he was real passionate about watching that show in particular, and not much interested in him. Like, he'd watch wrestling and he'd get a little pissed at wrestling. I mean, I'd be a kid and I'd be like, wow, look at this. And he'd be pissed. He'd be like, that's fake. That's not real. We're going to watch, you want to watch some real strong guys. And it never fails. On comes World's Strongest Man. So it was just very interesting to watch when you see your dad is really interested in something and it's something that he respects. I think especially as a son, I think you're very drawn to that. And you're like, wow, this is something that my dad really respects. I want to do that. Well, there's one small problem with that. I lost the genetic lottery. So I may have gained it somewhat in my brain, but when it came to physically, that was certainly not going to be the cards. But it was the kind of thing I could enjoy with my dad, and we could kind of relate and have that kind of bond, if you will. And I think that helped me with the work ethic too, because I would see how hard my dad would work, translate to how strong my dad was. My dad watched that show. I saw how strong those guys were. And by default, I think you just assume, wow, I bet that's really hard. I bet that takes a lot of work to be able to do that, what these guys are doing. So that was kind of the first introduction and something that was just a staple of my entire life. So as my career has gone on, I've met most of those guys I watched on TV with my dad.
100%.
Which that's very surreal too, and kind of very interesting. But I was high up with a weight loss company that I won't give them the free marketing money, but I was very high up, and it was actually owned by former owner of the Philadelphia 76ers, a great guy. Very smart guy who I would pick his brain here and there because he was very outgoing. if you'd catch him in the halls in between meetings and stuff that we'd have at the corporate office. And he would say very encouraging things too. Like, he was one of the first people that made me think maybe I was intelligent. In school, I was a very average student. In college, I took biology. I wanted to be something with that, but I certainly didn't know I wanted to have anything to do with nutrition yet. I just knew I was fascinated with the body, related mainly to being strength, again, because of the way things started out with my dad and what we watched on TV. And it did that. And then I thought, well, man, maybe I'll be a lawyer because, brain stuff. So we'll kind of go that route. I was very smart when it came to testing. Problem was I would get very bored if it was a topic that did not interest me. The biology stuff interested me, so I excelled in that in college. And then through one thing or the other, I kind of foregoed the pursuing the criminal justice type of thing with law, and became a family man and was in that career space. And with that, working for that company, having that exposure to Harold Katz, individual that's so easy to respect because he built himself from nothing as well. He has a very fascinating story of the family grocery store and building that up and to what he became. And but when somebody like that takes notice in you and makes you feel like, hey, maybe I do think a little differently, or maybe I see things a little differently and have something to offer, that really resonates and sticks and motivates. I knew I was blessed to have access to him, to be around him in any capacity. And the team that he had assembled under him were incredibly brilliant people who, again, showed me a lot and helped me kind of get some sort of a business mindset too, I guess you would say. But a lot of times when we would have the company meetings, people would go out for dinner, right? Because it was a big gathering and everybody got along so well. It was really an incredible group of team that he had assembled. And I would actually hang back. I was a married guy and kind of a homebody more than anything. So I would hang back and I would hang out with the dietitians a lot. So I would go in where they were because they were writing a lot of the things that we would then roll out throughout the company. And so I already had the background. I had worked loosely with different athletes, who were in college, who would ask my opinion on stuff. And I would kind of starting already doing the diet stuff with that on my own, kind of on the side. And, but it was speaking with the dietitians and picking their brain because a lot of it was unique. It wasn't what, kind of what was out there in whatever general knowledge. It wasn't reinventing the wheel by any saying, but it was basically getting rid of all the fluff. And they're like, yeah, no, they just need this or they just need that. And so that really helped me to develop the mindset of, you know what, there's no need to overcomplicate this. And when I saw how they were viewing things as well, and there was never any panic and anything, everything was all been here, done that, and then they're rolling it out to the masses across the world, I was like, okay, I think I kind of understand how they're viewing this and where that can go. And so I was doing that and exploring that on the side and moved to Texas. With Texas, I met Ryan Bracewell.
Yep.
And Ryan was trying to win his pro card, and he happened to live less than 5 minutes from me. He owned a Nutrition Depot store right there in Kingwood, and I would go visit him and talk, and he'd be like, hey, I opened up a small gym down here. He's like, come visit, hang out. And so we would do that, and he started asking me questions on nutrition and diets. And he's like, hey, you seem to know a lot about diets. I'm going for this pro card in this sport called strongman. I'm like, hey, I know all about that because of my dad and all that.
Yeah.
And he was like, okay. He's like, well, I mean, if you want to write me up something, he goes, that'd be cool, I guess. And Ryan's very knowledgeable too, just like yourself. He has a nutrition background too and studied through college and has that background. But it's just one of those things, it's hard to know where to begin, or even if you have the background and the knowledge, especially if it's yourself.
Yeah.
It's like, man, which direction do I go? I got 50,000 choices. Which one's the right one?
Yeah.
And so I started working with Ryan, and he was pursuing his pro card, and eventually he won his pro card. During that time of training and going for his pro card, he was training down at the unit, which was the storage facility that Travis Ortmeyer was training out of.
Yeah.
So he would go down there and train with Travis. And so Travis started taking note of Ryan was getting progressively better. And things he used to be able to just stomp him on during the trainings, Ryan was able to keep up with. And Ryan was like, man, or Travis was like, wow, what are you doing? Like, what's going on here? All of a sudden you're like able to keep up with the old man. What's going on here?
Yeah.
And Ryan was like, well, come on and train at my place, which was the Asylum Gym there in Kingwood. And he goes, Nathan's there. He goes, and that's who's helping me. He goes, maybe pick his brain or something.
Yeah.
Travis came up, started training there a couple weekends here or there, and same thing. I remember vividly Travis sitting down on a weight bench, and he was getting ready to do, I think one of the Mohegan Suns or something was the next one that he had up. And he started asking me questions, and he was like, hey, you think you can, we don't have that much time, but you think you can put something together and we go ahead and go for that Mohegan Sun thing? This is coming up prior to World's Strongest Man. And I was like, yeah, absolutely. And so we did that, and he did very well there. And we started our relationship from that point on. And I think it's 2009. It's going way back.
Yeah.
And that first World's Strongest Man there with Travis. And that's really how it all began, and Travis, from doing the Arnold Classic in 2011 against you, is what led you and I to hook up. Sort of like Travis had taken note of Ryan, you took note of Travis. Now you had won the Arnold.
Yeah.
Travis, I think, was on the podium. I think he was third or fourth. And you took note of that and slid into my DMs. Everybody cracks up when I use that term.
Yeah.
And you were like, hey, I saw Travis. I can't believe how different he looks and how different he performed. And really from there is everything.
Yeah.
It goes from there.
It's fascinating. And you said a lot. It's neat to hear that, like, about your dad, like that story and how you related that. And I'm sure as a kid, because we all do this in some way, shape, or form, especially when your dad is very present and puts in that type of work. It's your dad is like Superman, right? Like, it's like he can do whatever. And it sounds quite literally like if he's picking up a transmission and just going and working on it, like, oh, I don't need a crane, I don't need anything. I mean, that's functional strength at its best, right? And it's work to be done. And I can see why he wouldn't potentially gravitate toward pro wrestling, right? Like, that would be like, hey, no, we're not watching these guys oiled up and in spandex or whatever. Like, let's watch some real functional strength being done, because I'm sure he could relate to that in different ways. And it sounds like for you navigating that course, you gravitated towards that and took an interest in the nutrition side of things, and then ultimately in performance nutrition, and how that path unfolded, like with you moving to Texas. Because where were you at before?
St. Louis.
So you started working for this other company in St. Louis, and then eventually, did you kind of part ways with them, or what took you to Texas?
I kind of did both. So I was with them. Actually, I was with them in Texas. So
okay, so they had another kind of extension.
Yeah, so actually I was with them in Texas.
All right.
But my territory could be anywhere. So I would like pop into, Grand Forks, North Dakota, or I'd pop into Toronto, Canada, or I'd pop into, you name it, like all across the country.
Interesting.
So I would pop in, we would open new territories. So we would open franchises, and as the new franchisees would open their territories, they would send me in basically to get everybody up to snuff. This is how we do it at corporate. Then you go from there.
Got it.
And so that's kind of where, like, that whole whatever business and travels and the whole nutrition aspect came in as I was doing those things. But I was also on the side helping other individuals. So doing both those things at the same time until eventually I was able to just be like, well, technically I was pushed through the universe, or however that works. Legally, I'm not sure how much when there's corporate stuff and you're up there and have some of the background on things. I don't know how much you can say, but
yeah,
a change happened at the very top of the company that led the company to dissolve is the best way of putting it.
Interesting.
And I was treated wonderfully during that entire process, though, and certainly very well taken care of with the exit strategy and all that. I was very blessed.
Oh, that's good.
And honestly, it was during that time where they took care of me that during those 3 or 4 months, I was able to really knuckle down. I mean, something lights a fire under your pants. Like, well, I got to make a living.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And I knew that that's what I really enjoyed, that, man, the business part is interesting and fascinating to me. I especially enjoyed the marketing aspect. Like I had contributed to several of the ideas that we put out and used as a company. And that felt very rewarding, but it was still, though, the passion and the interest, again, related to my childhood and my dad, especially in the nutrition aspect of things. That really let me, like, this is what I like to do. So let me really knuckle down and really put my thinking cap on and acquire as much more knowledge as I can during this and see if I can do something this directly. Yeah. Like me be that person rather than a company. And even to tie that in with additional motivation is that my brother, Dennis, is a type 1 diabetic. He was diagnosed in high school. And unfortunately, when you're that age, I don't think that you're equipped to understand the magnitude of the impact that has on someone. And so when he first got diagnosed, I knew what diabetes was. I knew what that meant, but I lacked the understanding at 16 years old, 17 years old of how much this was going to change somebody's life and the modifications that individual would have to have. And just the change. And it's very stressful, obviously. And there's a lot of things that have to go on with that. And a lot of that nutrition stuff too, and the interest on me is in the background is I was trying to find out a way to also help him. And maybe I can figure out, I wasn't going to cure diabetes, but find some way to make his quality of life better, to make it, be some sort of an asset. Because I feel like I dropped the ball in high school, but I think that's a bit too much on myself there. I mean, who knows that kind of like thing in high school? Who's
equipped? Yeah.
But you still have that emotional attachment to it, and you feel
Big
guilty.
Time. Yeah.
But you
obviously had a passion for it, man.
Right.
And once that path kind of opened up, and those avenues were there, and it's like, hey, I can work with this individual, help them to perform better. I'm imagining that's somewhat of a very positive reinforcement thing. It's like, wow, this is working. This is good. And as they get excited, you get more excited. And, that's such a neat thing. And also at that point in strongman, and I'm sure a lot of people will probably be somewhat shocked by this, but not a lot of the guys were working with any type of nutritionist, right? That was not really a thing that was present.
I still have PTSD or whatever you call it from that whole experience. So, again, Ryan, he kept telling me that, and Travis started really chiming in too. Travis and Derek Poundstone and a few of the other guys were on Morunde Muscle.
Yep.
So
that was the forum.
That was the only one that existed.
Yeah.
That was it.
Yeah. Because there was no social media. Forums were it. That's how you communicated, got information. That's what it was. Yeah.
Absolutely. And so that was the main thing. And so like any amateur strongman, anyone who had any sort of inkling on that sport, and then some of the pros would be in there and they would actively comment and participate as well. And Ryan kept insisting, man, you've got to get in on that. You got to get in on that because we all just eat like shit. He goes, I didn't know any better until you showed up. Travis started saying the same thing. He goes, dude, I just thought we were supposed to eat as much as you can, get as big as you can, and that's all that mattered. He goes, that's the way it's always been. He goes, that's what we do. He goes, you got to get in there. He goes, because this is totally different. Nobody does this. And dude, this is like, because I mean, I was Ryan like a couple years even before Travis. You're talking 2007, 2006, like it's way back. It's almost 20 years.
Yep.
And so okay, Ryan, I'll do that. Ryan, he's always the one behind me, like, come on, get your ass out there, market yourself, promote yourself. You always just hide in the shadows. I'm like, just a job. I just work.
Yes.
Like you guys are doing your thing. I'm just a guy helping out in the background. Anyhow, so prodded, I eventually signed up and hi, I'm, Nathan, blah, blah, blah. And, I work with Ryan and I work with Travis and, I'm here as a nutrition resource. If you guys have any questions, let me know. And so people would be like, oh, what good is that? Like, all we got to do is eat. Like, I mean, it's nice that you're here. It's nice that you know those two guys, but I don't need to be told how to eat all I can at a buffet.
Yeah.
And make sure I hit that ice cream machine hard on the way out.
Sure.
They're like, I don't need to know that. And that was like day one. And it just got way worse from there. It would be relentlessly like a guy would say like, okay, like, so give me an example. Like, what do you think that I should eat or whatever? Yeah. So I'd answer it in public, and it'd be like, my healthy take on things. So it might be some sort of chicken, rice and or potato, steak and or beef, fish mixed in, vegetables, fruit, but again, nothing that knocks your flow off. There's no magic anything. It is balanced because, as you know, for me, a lot of it is lifestyle. But back then, it was the bare bones. That's what it is. And not that dissimilar from bodybuilding type stuff, but different because I would still tell them that they need to at least have one, cheat meal a day, that kind of thing, just to keep things up. And holy mackerel, you talk about abuse on every scale from every direction. I mean, this is the stupidest shit I've ever read. This is useless. I'll see you later. I'm headed to KFC for 3, buckets ridiculous. Of whatever and some biscuits and honey. It was not a warm and fuzzy environment, to say the least. Next thing you know, anytime I would post anything and, like good luck to Travis at, whatever contest he might be having in, or, good luck for Ryan as he goes for his pro card. It would be like, yeah, that's nice, chicken and rice guy, whatever.
Sure.
So it's like I'm always that guy. So like I was like way back then, 20 years ago, I'm trying to introduce nutrition to the sport, and I'm the chicken and rice guy, which I'm not even a chicken fan myself really, but it was just illustrating the clean aspect of things. But then, I evolved into the Rice Krispie guy, but it was bludgeoning after bludgeoning after bludgeoning. And Ryan kept telling me, hang in there, man, hang in there. They'll get it. They'll see what Travis is doing. And to some degree, yes, because Travis, once about a year in, kind of Travis version 2.0 appeared, and that was when you started to see him. That's still prior to 2011, but when he all of a sudden is showing up jacked, ripped, shredded.
Yep. That
didn't exist. Now, Pujanowski, okay, but Travis was ripped beyond that.
Sure.
And the thing that helped. So some people were like, yeah, Travis looks great, but whatever, he could still be just as good if he was just going to the buffet and eating everything under the sun and the Sundays and everything. And it was actually Derek Poundstone who, no other term of saying, came to my defense, or the White Knight. Derek popped in and basically just silenced everybody with Derek said. And Derek hadn't really been involved in any of this going on, And after all this time, Derek popped in one time and he just said, I pretty much eat chicken and rice all the time. Sometimes I make a chicken shake. Seems to be working okay for me.
Yep.
And honestly, and I told Derek that when I saw him at the Arnold a couple years ago when he was coaching Rob Kearney. And I was telling him, going over that store, and he laughs and he goes, man, that was a wild time on there, wasn't it? He goes, I'll give it to you. He goes, you got a set of balls. I don't know how you handled all that. You're trying to introduce the most foreign thing on the world. He goes, and you hung in there. You took it. And so it was honestly when that happened, combined with Travis, and then Ryan won his pro card too. But Derek is like the voice of the Almighty came down, and everybody shut up because they couldn't argue with Derek.
Sure.
They couldn't tell Derek he was wrong because the proof was in the results, and it was, Well,
and that's I think that's the thing is when you introduce something new, a different way of thinking about, especially about something that big, when you have this group of individuals that's very much from that mindset of we're just going to eat whatever's in sight, get, as big as we possibly can, and we're going to go lift weights, and that's what it is, right? Like we're not thinking about the professional approach or what, is going to fine tune performance. Really nothing like that. It was a different mindset, and I think now, things have evolved. And, for me, I was using definitely what I had, right, to get up to the level that I was at. And, I think the thing for me is I was always wanting to take the next step, right? So like I never wanted to be comfortable with, hey, like, and like you said, I had won the Arnold, and, I was coming into World's Strongest Man off of tying the year before. And like, this is like, I knew I was at that level, but it's like, okay, if I'm at that level, how can I get better? Right. And this is where I was like, okay, if I can fine tune the nutrition side of things, that's only going to make me better. Right. So that's really, yes, seeing Travis, but I was like, all right, there's more here. Right. Like, and I was like, all right, I need to check out with this. But the thing with reaching out, and I have always very much been this way, as far as respecting the other guys and like Travis, you and Travis, because I didn't know like what your relationship was. I didn't know how things were there. And like reaching out, I remember being like, all right, I'm going to send a message, as you're saying, slide into the DMs, whatever. And, it's like, hey man, I'm fully expecting you to come back and say, hey, you know what? I'm working with Travis. You're competing against Travis right now. Like I'm not going to help you, whatever. And so it's, one of those things where I think I even asked you to talk to Travis.
Absolutely.
And say like, hey, make sure it's okay with him. And then, and then we kind of took off from there. But, I think that was such a good thing, because it was just the next step for me. Right. Cause I was coming in and I wanted to look at everything and break everything down to try to be better. And ultimately that's really what it was, is, coming in like I'm, doing what I'm doing. Let's see if we can refine it a little bit. And then we kind of hit the ground running from there.
Mm-hmm. No. Yeah. I mean, once we started going, there was no doubt that you're exactly as you said. You asked me to touch base with Travis, which I did. I touched base with Ryan to get his opinion on touching base with Travis, on touching base with you. Sure. So I'm running it by everybody, because I'm like, again, I still have PTSD from having the shit beat out of me for all that time. Yeah. From whatever being the.
It's so funny. I don't remember any of that, but I probably wasn't on there. Maybe I was and just didn't know. I don't know. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Or didn't pick up on it or whatever. But I know that the thing is, a forum like that could be brutal. Right. Oh, yeah. And people were not scared to share their opinion. And I guess to a certain extent, like social media now, right? When you're behind a screen or a keyboard or whatever, it's easy to say whatever you want to say because the person's not right there in front of you. So,
well, sure. And back then though, keep in mind, I'm just a guy with thoughts. I'm Elon Musk or whatever, and like, hey, I got this big ass remote control car that runs on batteries. You want to see what this thing does? Like, nutrition was completely foreign, and here's this guy trying to introduce nutrition into strongman, and I had nothing to back it up in a broad scale. Yeah. At that point, I've got Ryan, I've got Travis. And it's like, it's easy for people to throw that aside if they choose to, or however they want to view it, and be like, yeah, but whatever, it's two guys. And forever, it's been nothing but this way. Yeah. So that's thousands of guys, talking about all the amateur people pursuing things. Yes. Plus, of course, the guys actually doing it on the show. Yeah. And then there's these two dudes, and like I said, and then Derek, I guess, was sort of made guy 3, to at least be sort of the voice of, listen to what this guy has to say, because I've been doing that, not from me guiding Derek, but that's just been what Derek said felt right for him, eating clean, throwing in the occasional dirty thing, and going that style. And so being that first one through and taking that is a good time. Whereas now, fast forward, and I can point to any results, and there's I don't want to say there's no debate, because I don't mean that to be in some sort of arrogant way. Yeah. But I can say that I don't have to argue my point, because you can just see my point. Yeah. Yep. And so it's such a different world. But I swear, it's like people have it so easy nowadays. Like a lot of individuals, because of social media, none of these things existed, but because of social media, Instagram, Facebook, whatever, all this stuff, if you're doing diets or you're doing whatever, you can market, you can put yourself up there, and you might have helped one person, but it looks like you've helped 10,000. Yes. And so it is just such a different world, but it was no fun back in the day.
Yeah. Trying to pave that path. Oh. Yeah. And get into it. And people weren't accepting, right? So it's, I think there was a lot of things, and diet was certainly one of them, and that's where we can definitely stay, but it's like going along, like trying to take, the nutrition side of things seriously. And, it was an interesting spot because, going in, we started working together right before World's Strongest Man in 2011, which was my first win. And then we kind of rolled from there. And 2012 was a rough year for me with getting injured and going through the things that I went through. So you're trying to build back up, this machine, and we're trying all sorts of different things like to help with, some of the nerve stuff I had going on and whatever, which, you work through these challenges, right? Like you work through these challenges, but it was also, I'm sure for you too, it was like, oh man, all right, Brian just won. We're going to roll into 2012. And truth be told, man, like going into 2012, where the Arnold was typically the first one, right? I was ridiculous.
Yep.
Like honestly, and that's something like a lot of people don't realize is the level of strength that I was at in 2012 going into that contest was absurd. It completely honestly absurd. Was. And what I was doing in training, and the crazy part is I detached my bicep with that axle, the very first rep of the contest, and completed the contest. But and I may have this, used to have this all completely memorized, but I think if I would have done 2 reps on that axle instead of just the 1, if my bicep could have just torn on the second rep, I think I still would have won, which is wild. Like in that year, because I still finished. In that year, I finished in 4th overall, but it was very close even
with
going
one
into the
arm.
front. Yeah,
with one arm.
Yeah,
you called me right after it happened, and I'll never forget. I was at my girlfriend's house, now my wife Sandy, and I was sitting there and I was keeping track of everything. I'm like, okay, Travis going, or not Travis, Brian's going, and I'm like, okay, the phone rings because I saw, and I'm like, oh, and you were like, hey. Pretty sure I just tore my bicep. Yep. And I'm like, okay. And you're like, I'm going to keep going. And I'm like, what do you mean? And you go, well, I can't tear it again.
Yep.
And I'm like, doesn't it hurt? And you're like, oh, like you wouldn't believe.
Yeah.
And I'm like, but you're still going to keep going. And you're like, yeah. You're like, how strong I was coming into this. You're like, I got to put some of that on display. Yes. You're like, I didn't train all this to just leave it. And, you're like, I'm going to keep going. And it's not funny. It's not funny because you're a human being going through pain and tragedy at the time.
Yes. Yep.
But it's just complete disbelief because after each event, he would literally tell me, yep, it's a little farther up my arm now.
Yes, it was. Yeah.
Yep, it's a little farther up my arm now. Till the very end, it was all the way up, you know?
Yep.
And I was just like, in disbelief that you finished 4th with one arm in an unbelievable amount of pain. And that was honestly the first time. I mean, yes, we had won Worlds in 2011, but that was the first time that it really occurred to me, man, this guy's built different.
Yeah. It's a different, it's, and the weird part is when you get in that situation, stopping didn't enter my brain. Right. Like, and it was even after, cause that was the first event. We had 2 events that day. And I remember walking off the stage and I told, my handler buddy that was there with me, I was like, hey, I did something to my arm. I said, we're going to leave the elbow sleeve on. We'll put another one on and we'll figure it out. Like, cause circus dumbbell is next and I'll go do that, which obviously is, your bicep dependent,
just a wee bit
that weight. But I said, we'll figure it out, man. And it's just, there's a different spot that you can go mentally that a lot of people can never, ever tap into. And you can do things that are insane, right? Like, and it's just a different mentality, but also like my approach, right? Because I had done everything to get ready for that. So like we hit all of my diet was on point. All my training was on point. All the numbers were there. I was ready to rock and roll. I mean, I was stronger than I had ever been. And the performance was, I was ready to perform, I was ready to do it. Right. And most people, you feel something like that happen to you. And the first thing is the white flag is waving. I'm done. Give me the sling. Let me walk around like I'm injured the whole damn time, whatever. Whereas like for me, it was, I don't know if I even said anything to anybody backstage. I just put that on and said, we're going to figure out a warm up here and we're going to go. And then I went and got checked out in secret as well. Like I don't know if the guys that I was competing against, even at that point, knew, maybe until it like became apparent. but I definitely was not coming in saying like, oh, the biceps torn off, right? It was still, I might be injured, but you're not going to know, right? And that's a different thing. And a lot of people would say, well, you're crazy, but I did go get it checked out. I said the same thing to the surgeon, right? Which I'm sure people have maybe heard me say this before, but he said, well, I'm doing all the tests. Yeah, your tendon's torn. It's detached. It's not there. And my question is to him was, well, can I compete? And he, like, the weirdest look on his face too, because he's like, nobody ever asked me that.
Right.
I just told you your tendon is detached, right? And his response was, and I'm sure that's what I conveyed to you, was, you can't tear it again.
Mm-hmm.
So it's up to you. You go do, I'm telling you you do whatever you want to do, but like you literally detach your tendon. So, it's a different mindset, man. But for me, it made sense. It made sense, right? Like, and I was there to compete. I had trained to compete. I had trained to perform. And so there is no backing down. I might be wounded a little bit, man, but like, you're not going to get me to lay down. Like, I'm not going to lay down and give up. And I think that's, that really entailed a lot of 2012 that way, because it was coming back and fighting back. And, the crazy part is too, is going into World's Strongest Man then, which was a full recovery. I was more motivated than ever in 2012 because I did all the things, right? Did the surgery. Surgery was perfect. Everything healed perfectly. I had another MRI done to confirm that. Then I went into full training. And all of the numbers, again, that I was hitting going into 2012 World's Strongest Man were absurd.
Right.
My pressing was the best that it ever been. We had a max log that year, and I was like, man, this is great, because I'm going to show everybody that the press is not even close to weakness, and that's going to put the cherry on top. And, that year we had a natural stone loading, which I was excited about, and like just a few different things. But all of the numbers were indicating like, wow, I'm coming back fully. And then all the nerve stuff started. Right. Like right before that contest. And it was such a challenge again. But, as much as competing through the bicep being torn, potentially with World's Strongest Man in 2012 was even worse, because I stopped being able to make my fingers move. Yep. And I lost feeling. And I was getting, and again, I've said this stuff before, but like I was getting dressed because I could not tie my shoes. I was not physically capable of tying my shoes. I couldn't pull up my supportive gear on my own. I needed help to do that. So I couldn't put on anything. So I would get dressed fully in my room. And thankfully we were at a hotel, and that year we were competing a lot in front of the hotel. Yep. And so I didn't, but again, I would walk down, and not one of the guys in that contest, not one of them knew that I was messed up. Like, I was going and I was trying to talk to like the doctor that was there and say like, hey, this is going on. And he doesn't know what's going on, of course. But it's like, there's a different level that you can go to in your mind when you're facing extreme adversity and fight through it. Right. And like in a lot of ways, like I would maybe argue that those finishes, because again, I finished 4th at World's Strongest Man that year. Little controversy because they changed the rules last minute, as often happens there with the power stairs and the order you had to do them. And that'll, go down in history. Like, people will forget about it. Let's just put it that way, right? Like, well, the rules got changed the last minute. I followed the rules. Other guys didn't. No penalty, no nothing, which is what it is. But it's like those finishes, right? Not placement related, but just finishing, simply fighting through those two things in 2012. I think in a lot of ways, you could argue that potentially defined me a little bit, right? Because, this is, I knew I had that in me, but to go through that and fight through that, something like that, most people can't even comprehend. They can't fathom what that is like or going through it. And I know for 100%, because I've seen it happen. Guys quit for less than that. They'll I pulled something. I bruised this. I bruised that. I'm done. I'm not gonna go through it, right? But you're talking about two horrible things to fight through them. And I think in a lot of ways, and you can talk about it too, like working with me, I'm sure you're like, well, this dude's, there's a different switch there, right?
Well, I was about to say there's two components even to what you just said that I'm not sure you remember, or and I know nobody knows about. So 2 things about making like the impossible possible. So in June, I saw, remember the text like there was no tomorrow. We'd had the surgery, and I'm eyeballing, and I'm aware that the world's is like the end of September.
Yep.
And I'm staring at that, and it's June. We've had the surgery, and I literally, it's etched in my brain reading it when I opened it, and it was like, basically like I still haven't picked up a 20-pound dumbbell with the arm yet. Yeah. It's exactly what you said. And I looked at my calendar again, and I just thought to myself, okay, he still hasn't picked up a 20-pound dumbbell, and we have World's Strongest Man in September, and it's June. And so I told you, I said, okay, what are your thoughts on Worlds? I'll ask all my guys that. The one thing I'm not, if guys ask me my opinion, I'm not that coach that is going to throw you into the fire. Like I will literally, we're going to come to the conclusion on this together, and it's going to be your decision, not you following your coach's decision.
Absolutely.
I don't think that's healthy, and I don't think it puts the athlete in the right position. So if the athlete comes to the conclusion from a healthy discussion on pros and cons and risks and whatever, and the athlete's decision is go time, is go time.
Yep.
It's Brian Shaw, who clearly within half of a second of me asking that question is go time.
Yes.
Okay, it's go time. So, from that point on, it was full throttle. Even though 20-pound dumbbell was, you still had not picked up a 20-pound dumbbell yet. You hadn't gotten up that far with the arm. And it's just, you have to put your faith, especially if you're a coach too. You got to know your athlete, and you have to put your faith in the athlete. You don't need to be the coach that drives the car. The athlete has to drive the car. But you need to have faith in the athlete and support them that way, rather than just throw everything under the sun at them irresponsibly.
Yeah.
I mean, you can get somebody ready for something, but there's responsible and there's irresponsible. And responsible is always letting that athlete drive the truck.
Yep.
And you were like, nope, it's go time. You're like, that 20-pounder is going to come up, and then guess what? A 30-pounder is going to come up, and guess what? Then it's going to be a 60.
Yep.
And, that's how we're going to go about it. And I'm like, boom, okay. So it was on. And from that point on, it was one of the most intense preps I've ever, probably the most intense prep that I've ever done, just in order to hit timelines and to make sure that not only are you fueled for the trainings that you're doing, but that the recovery is staying way ahead, because you're having to advance a lot of that on blind faith, faith and believing in yourself, and then blind faith that I'm doing whatever is going to be necessary to keep up with where you're trying to go. And so that was astonishing when we hit that casino. It was in that parking lot of the casino in Los Angeles. And when you hit that, it was unbelievable that you hit it. Your strength was high again.
Yep.
By the time we rolled into that, you were strong. We had the nerve things with the hand stuff that were going, but the strength had managed to be there. And then I don't know if you recall. So it was about 110 degrees or something on that blacktop in front of that casino. It was unbelievably hot. And you got heat stroke one of those days. And I had to put you in the shower. So you were like, dude, I feel so shaky. I'm so sick. I just done an event. You're like, I'm nauseous. You're like, I'm sweating like crazy, but I'm cold. I'm like, Brian, you're either severely overheated or you're kicking into heat stroke, And so I was like, here's what we do: get in the shower and all that. So you had to take all your stuff off in between events.
I remember that.
Go in there. And we had to piece you back together again.
God, that's,
get you out of that and then fill you back up for the next event.
Everything, yeah.
But it's like that contest alone had so many facets of things that you were overcoming. But in true Brian Shaw fashion, you didn't even flinch on that either. You're calmly relaying that story to me of what you've got going on. And I'm kind of like, okay, I know what this is. So I have to calmly give you how we get out of this stage. And you just didn't even blink. You were like, okay, I did what you said. I'm definitely feeling better. What's next? That's all you said. What's next?
Go. Yeah.
I'm like, okay, now we start eating and get ready for the next event.
Yeah.
You didn't even flinch at what had just happened there. It's like unbelievable.
Yeah, that's wild, man. I mean, it's just a mindset. It's a mindset, right? Like, and you know, I don't know that I can fully answer now. I mean, to me, that was normal, right? And where it's coming from, you don't quit, you don't give up, you never back down, like these type of things. But that's just what I believe. And so it's one thing to, I guess, to speak it, but when you get faced with it, it's a very different thing how you react, right? And I think that's, you know, that's one of those things where, you know, some of that stuff, and that's probably, to be fair, that'll be the first time people have heard that story, right? But it's again, behind closed doors, because nobody's going to give me a special award for going through any of that, right? They don't care. And ultimately, like what I would say is, it only matters, it truly only matters if you win or lose coming out of it, right? Like that's all people are going to remember. So whether I had a problem with the bicep or problem with my hand or problem with my arm or heat stroke, whatever, did I win or lose, right? That's the pass or failure, you know, like success or failure, maybe a better way to say it, where that's what's going to go down in the history books is like, people don't care what adversity you're dealing with. Were you able to overcome it? Were you able to win? Perfect, right? And that could be that you had no problems. That could be that you had a lot of problems, and then you were able to win in spite of all those problems, or you know, maybe you just hit it right. And it's not, I guess that journey, right? Like there's a lot of growth that can happen through the journey, and I think that in a lot of ways, like I look back on that year in particular, where it's like I was forced to grow in a lot of different ways, where it was, you know, I could have met that stuff differently, and I could have gone at it differently. And I would, in a lot of ways, be a different person probably now, because I would forever have to live with the fact that I quit, I gave up, I threw in the towel, I wasn't willing to fight through this adversity. And, you know, that's just not what I'm about, right? Like, and I think that's where, you know, people, and I understand not everybody's going to think that way. Not everybody's going to respond to that situation. But, you know, for some people out there, they see people fight through things, whether it be, and this is all competitive stuff I'm going through, but there's people that have to deal with cancer or some type of crazy medical condition or whatever. Like, and those people also have no choice in a lot of those circumstances, but it's how do they fight through it? And, you know, I mean, I've seen different people, and it's like, okay, those people motivate me too, right? Because they fight through crazy stuff, and all I have to do is get up and lift some crazy weights. Like, it's not the same, right? You know, it's just, I approach it in my way, and if I had to deal with something like that, I'm sure I would attack it the same way. But, you know, it's a interesting one, like because you would be the only person, like technically speaking at that time, because I was self-coached. I did all my own training. So like you were the only person I would talk to that knew anything that was going on behind the scenes, right? Like it wasn't like that was common knowledge at all. It was like the person with me and you knew, and that was basically what was going on. So there was a lot of trust also that was built there too.
And then coming out of that, you know, we still had the nerve thing that had to get corrected coming out of Worlds after 12. And the nerve thing got corrected. You had the procedure. And then, you know, we go into 13. So we still did not exactly have giant chunks of like perfect stretches or whatever, because having to work around the nerve and go through that. And then you go into the Arnold for 13. Of course, you go to Worlds for 13.
Yep.
You know, great things happen. But all those things were still like just a continuous, like you said, as far as trust. It's almost like there was a blind faith where you knew where we were trying to go. You trusted I knew where we were trying to go.
Yep.
And we're just going to get there. And it's execute. And one way or another, you're going to put all the chips on the table, and it's going to go. And so, yeah, that's something that people I don't think can fathom how difficult that is to do, you know, because to crush that self-doubt as you're going through the nerve issue, as you're finally somebody had an answer for it, right? I mean, how many people did you see that had zero answer for that?
Oh, it was horrible.
Yes.
Yeah, horrible.
So, and then you had the release, and then it's just that just blind faith and just, I mean, trust in yourself, obviously, where you're like, it's going to get done.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, well, building like I guess like the structure of, and I'm sure people would be fascinated by this, is like the structure of my diet and like how it progressed. Because at that point in time, you know, we're talking, say, coming out of 12, 13, going into 14, 15, 16. In the sport of strongman, it definitely was that the weights kept getting heavier. Mm-hmm. So every year you'd kind of come out and whatever event it was like, wow, that's crazy. Like this big weight is being thrown out there. Like, how are you going to approach it? And so, you know, there's a certain facet of training, mental approach. How are you going to take that? But then also the diet that goes along with it, mm-hmm. so that we're hitting what we have to within that. So, you know, I think people would be fascinated to hear kind of like the structure of how we kept kind of building and building and building up like through those years to handle the weights that were at these contests.
Right. And for the record, these are weights that had never, ever been done at up to that time.
Yeah.
So during that part of your era, if you will, it's almost like you were the guinea pig. You were the trailblazer, and it became, well, Brian Shaw's really strong. Brian Shaw is extremely good. Do you think it could handle this? And it almost became, to some degree, like, let's see what whoever's number one at that time, which would have been you, let's see what they can handle. Let's see, can they do more? Like, and the weights jumped to a tremendous degree during that period from what guys used to have to do at a contest, and then what became suddenly more and more. It's like an arms race, more and more and more. And so you're trudging forward, you're having to blaze that trail and see, can the human body do this? Can the human body have 1,400 pounds of hay bales on its back?
Yep.
And you're like, yeah, in fact, I'm going to do it in 14.78 seconds or whatever it was. Like, it was ridiculous. And everybody else moves it like 2 meters. You know, so, you know, you are going to trailblaze that. But at the same time, as much as you have that blind faith in yourself and the training and being able to, I'm sure I can do that weight, I have to do the same thing. Like, okay, I'm sure that I have enough belief in what I know how to do that I can get Brian to be able to do that and not get crushed.
Yep.
You know, and that becomes a very fine line between fueling you to do something your body has never done before, be it reps, be it speed, or be it a max, static thing, and recover from that. So that's a very complicated process when you're trying to make the body do something it's never done. That's number one. And then after the body has just done something it's never done, recovering from that so that in 3 weeks we can also do something that the body has never done, so that we can recover from that, so that in another 2 weeks the body can do something it's never done. That is an unbelievable process of continuously trying to not only feed the amount of macros that it takes, especially the protein, to recover and facilitate, all the very micro tears and stuff like that are going to go on, but also making sure that I'm very, very aware of your connective tissues, that I'm very aware of your bone strength. Those are things that a lot of people don't ever just take into consideration. It's always muscle, stronger. Mm-hmm. And I honestly always viewed it a little bit differently. It was always like kind of inside out. So I'd start with the frame of the car and its bones, so be very calcium dependent, and then things to help the body retain calcium to help support that bone strength as much as possible. And then things to help with the connective tissues, so your tendons, ligaments, cartilage, all those things are heavily supported. And then focusing on the muscle aspect, because everybody knows guys who are just strong that don't necessarily, they're like lanky. Yeah. Like they're not big, bulky or anything. They're just lanky, but they're strong. That's that bone strength. That's that frame. Mm-hmm. That's that frame strength. That's bone, connective tissue. It's their connective tissues that are doing a lot of that strength. They're doing more so than their muscles. So if you can build that frame out, then I just viewed it as you can drop whatever size engine with whatever size horsepower you want into that frame, and it's not going to twist and bend that frame.
Sure.
It's not going to break, and it's going to support it, and the whole system can move as one. And it was kind of reinventing that process, just trying to keep up with you and what your body was being asked of through that time period in strongman, when it was, let's see what's actually possible, and everything greatly amplified. So protein can do amazing things. Protein, obviously everyone knows that's what repairs your muscle tissue. It also has profound impact on your cognitive abilities. So a lot of your reaction times, and some of the NFL guys that I work with, it's the same thing too, when they don't necessarily relate the importance on a diet, because some of them are just genetically gifted beyond belief.
Yeah.
Maybe minimally even have lifted weights, but they're ripped and jacked and amazingly fast and gifted, strong. But protein also can definitely impact how your neurotransmitters and everything fires, and you can speed that up so your reaction times are quicker. So protein can serve many benefits during that time, but you also, when you're giving protein to a client in a high amount, you have to keep in mind two things. The body will convert protein over through gluconeogenesis, to glucose. So that's why a lot of people can get away with carnivore diets and stuff like that and feel quite comfortable on them, because they're eating a very large amount of protein, and the body is cannibalizing, if you will, some of that protein that they're taking in for energy through converting it over. If you spare the protein from being cannibalized like that, so making sure that it is paired with a fair amount of carbohydrates and a fair amount of fats, either or, sometimes both, then the body's using those for fuel and leaving that protein alone, so that protein is even more readily available for those tissues. And so that's where like a lot of the enhancing, like the clean diets, targeting your trainings, so giving you more fuel before you train and then giving you more fuel after you train with higher macros, some of them dirtier, because at the end of the day, you're trying to make the body do something it's never done before, and you can't do that with giving it the same thing you always give it. So if you always have steak and rice, which is awesome, you're going to always get the results that steak and rice gives you, which again is awesome. But if you're trying to go somewhere drastically different than you yourself have ever gone, you got to also give your body something drastically different. And that's where a lot of the dirtier things mixed in and kind of targeting training sessions really dramatically in a positive way impact, physical performance and what that human body is available. You and I have talked, like for bodybuilders, they eat extremely clean during their contest prep. So they might have a 12 or a 16 week period leading up into the Olympia or the Arnold or what have you. And that's when they're eating extremely clean: chicken and rice, beef and rice, fish and rice, some vegetables. That's what we're doing. And we're going to do that for 12 or 16 weeks. That's also when those guys are at their weakest. So that's not the method that for strongman you want to go and make that the be all end all only resource for the body. The bodybuilders put on all their strength and they're at their strongest during the off season. That's when they add their size. That's when they add their strength. And that's when they're able to put on that quality tissue that when they diet back down, there's the end results of what they did. And that's only possible through dirtying up the foods, if you will.
It's such a fascinating thing, man, because the loads at that time, even now, I don't know if some of those events, right, if they came back and they were put out there at that type of weight, I don't know what the reaction would be.
The bale itself, the hay bale yoke. I mean,
well, here's the thing: is
nuts.
the top weight of that was 1,565 pounds. That was the top end, right? And on that day, this is a good thing to be able to say, but I honestly, I don't know how much more I could have lifted. I could have lifted more.
Yes.
For sure.
Because you literally ran with it, and it was 14 some odd seconds. I'm positive of that.
I didn't put it down, and everybody else for sure put it down. It was
at the start. Everybody else pretty much put it down at the start.
Stop. And that, like that type of load, is I was genuinely thinking at the time 2,000 pounds was possible, right? Like, and that was a real thought I had, like surpassing that. And I thought, okay, if they keep going with this type of event, we get to 2,000, I think I can do that, right? But that was the way that I thought, and the way that we were lining up. And I would walk out there on that stage to do those type of things. And whether it was one year we had the 116 with a 300-pound dumbbell for reps, right? so easy. So easy like that. And, you know, I mean, we could even pull up that video probably of the 300-pound dumbbell for reps. And, you know, people were talking about this, like a 300-pound dumbbell. We've had that before that with 274, and then they jumped it and there was a 300-pound option. And that, I mean, in that contest, I had to do 3 reps to win, but I could have done more. Right. And it's such an interesting thing, because those type of loads, it was where I always thrived the most. When it was the craziest weights, the biggest weights, whatever was thrown out there, it was going to get lifted, you know?
If I remember right too, during training, you broke the heaviest dumbbell you had.
I bent it.
You bent, yeah. And so, even going into the Arnold,
I was very concerned.
Yes. Yeah.
Because I had made one up and it bent. And then also inside of it, the only way I could make it heavy enough was we melted lead, because you couldn't fill it with lead because it wasn't big enough to get heavy enough. So I had to melt the lead too. And so the lead inside of one of the sides of it was loose.
Shifting, yes.
So I had a bent handle and the lead was loose. And I think, you know, that I had got up to, you know, I was concerned because I was lifting that at like I think I had it loaded at like 286, under 300. Then I went for 300, but it was so bent that I was trying to lift this dumbbell that was shaking, you know, and it just was not an ideal training tool, but also ironically enough, I think it actually helped me.
I agree.
Because when I got, so here's this dumbbell.
And what's funny is I was sitting next to Carrie in the audience. And so when you hit that, Carrie screamed out so loud, "Oh my God." And then she turned to me and goes, "He missed it in training."
Yeah. With that bent
because
one,
of the bent dumbbell,
yeah.
right. And then you hit it again and you hit it again. That was one of the most excited I've ever seen her.
Yeah, that backstage, man. I remember picking up the warm-ups and I was like, this is insane. Like it felt so easy. But again, it's certainly a byproduct of the training, but also when we put the puzzle together and everything lined up and my body was completely primed with all of the nutrition side of it, that's where I could lift a building, right? Like that was how I felt walking out on that stage. When we hit it right, it didn't matter. Like and that's it's a crazy thing. And I'm sure some people listening to this are going to say, okay, lift a building. I literally felt like I could lift whatever. It didn't matter, you know?
And that's a surreal true thing. Peak. Like you would always be able to tell me, because we would target along the way. You know, nobody's going for PRs at contest level type stuff, like all on the same day or all in the same week. You know, it's spread out with whatever's going on in the block.
Yeah.
And so you always knew. So it's like, okay, we PR'd here, deadlift PR'd there, yoke PR there, whatever that may be. But you would always tell me, you would always make it clear to me that you wanted to make sure I understood, but that can't be it. So the fact that you would hit a PR in the training block, you would always be like, hey, cool, hit a training block, smoked a low, smoked 420 log, whatever the case may be. And you'd be like, but that can't be it. So you wanted to make sure I always knew you got to have something else ready, so that when we hit that contest week, I truly peak, because you took a value in what you were able to hit in training, and it was very important. And you would text me ahead of time, hey, this, 2 days from now, I'm doing this. It's really important. I've got to hit this number because I need to know what that feels like. And I want to make sure that doesn't feel, like that is approaching the top end or whatever. And so we would strategically make sure you hit that. And so that was paramount. But you always wanted to make sure that even after we hit it, there's got to be something more, because that can't be it. Like, I'm not going to be satisfied if I get in the contest and I hit this PR that I hit today.
Yeah,
that's not going to be good enough.
Yeah,
and you wanted to make sure that we truly peaked, so that you were able to be near or beyond PR level in everything the week of that contest.
Yep. And having it all come together.
Yes.
I think that's the interesting part with it is, in moments in training, how the nutrition fit, right? And it's like, we're talking, it's such a weird thing, because like this, I think we got the dumbbell here. So like at 300 pounds,
like it's empty.
Yeah, it was a little bit different with stable, but it's like that was so easy. It was so, and the thing is like at that moment too, like walking out there, because you warm up backstage, and the way that moved, it was like, okay, that was a joke, a joke, right? So I'm taking,
and that was the first time that it ever happened. Nobody had ever lifted that, if I remember right. Isn't that correct?
Well, I was Kieliskowski did it, and then Zadrunas had got it. So I walked out
to
to
three.
Win. The three, no.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, but the three.
But those were the only two guys that got that. And so then this wanted to roll away from me. I remember thinking like, all right, I got to throw it back on. But, it's like this moment right here. So you're like how easy that was. And then this one was like, all right, this is no problem, right? So I'm going to chalk up. I'm casual, because you had plenty of clock to do it. So I knew I didn't have to rush. But, you're walking up there and this is like, it's a toy, man. Like a toy 300-pound dumbbell. And then this one, I remember this is a good moment because like I'm going to hold it up here
for 10 hours.
Then I'm going to flex, and it's like that's game over, But that was like you're hitting a peak there, where it was just a different animal, But the interesting part is, and a lot of people get caught up when we're talking about the training numbers, hitting numbers in training, hitting numbers in a contest, that type of thing. All of the eating that had to happen, right? That also gave me confidence, right? So I guess in people listening to this, it's like we're, talking about the performances, but all the training had to go into that performance, but all of the nutrition had to line up too.
Right.
Right. And I was very, very invested in that as well. And, the eating was a job. Like I literally looked at it as a part of my job. So it wasn't an afterthought. Like, so, I mean, that guy right there on that stage lifting that 300-pound dumbbell, every single time I left the house, I had a cooler of food. And I had not only the meal I needed to eat, I had a backup meal on top of it. So I never was guessing about where my food was coming from. And there was no way that I was ever going to fail. Right. And people understood for sure, like at that time, if I was eating, it was serious. Right. So I wasn't having a conversation with the food. It was, okay, I got to eat this amount of food because it's a big quantity. So I've got to put that down, and then I've got to be resting from eating until the next time I need to eat. Right. But it's this machine that I'm fueling up. And so putting in what we put into it and building up the way that we did, like that's where I'm playing my part too. So another thing I want to talk to you about is it's one deal, right? Like, so you're putting in all the thought on the back end and coming up with the master plan of what's going to happen, right? How, and let me see if I can ask this the correct way. I'm sure that you, over the years with me, gained confidence that you were going to give me something and that I was going to actually eat it.
Correct.
Right? Like, what is that like? And maybe what it was like with me compared to other people, like are there other people that you work with or have worked with where it's like, I give you this perfect plan. Here it is, but you're not eating what I'm telling you to eat. Yes.
And that's where I think experience comes into play and perhaps can be invaluable. And, I'm big on the mindset and mindfulness and things like that. And so I have to treat Brian Shaw like I treat Brian Shaw. I have to treat any of my other clients as I treat them, which is different from them, which is different from them.
Yeah.
Meaning when I design a diet, I'm going to design it knowing what your tendencies are, knowing who you are as a person, knowing what your lifestyle entails, knowing what your consistency is. Like, are you a 70%? Are you an 80%? Are you 100%? Are you a 50% when it comes to the diet?
Yeah.
From either working with an individual or just through generalized conversation with that individual, I can usually gauge where we're at and what this person's going to be. And so I preemptively will build a diet based on what I think that personality, that lifestyle, and that human being as a sole individual is likely to be able to pull off. I like to tell people it's like, I could find a unreleased album from the Beatles or something at a garage sale. In theory, that thing's worth millions upon millions of dollars. But if it's not, shared with someone, if someone doesn't have the means to play it,
yeah,
it's useless. If you can't listen to the thing, it's worthless, right? I mean, so who cares? And it's like best laid plans. Like, too many people think, I believe maybe, that a diet is one dimensional and it's a piece of paper with words and foods and eat it. But when you're talking about enhancing performance through nutrition, I believe that a diet has to basically be like 3D. It has to be alive. So it has to be able to float and move with that individual, however they are as an individual. So if their lifestyle is complicated, it's got to be able to weave in and out of that lifestyle. If their lifestyle is laid back, it's got to be able to match that. But typically with a laid back lifestyle, oddly also can come somewhat of a laid back personality that matches that. And so I will build the diet either over or under macros that, let's say, a piece of paper on a calculation should say that person should have based on their status and their activity level. I will then take into account the human being and be like, you know what, this person has a lot going on. Or I know that maybe the person tells me up front, look, my personal life is really stressful right now. There's a lot going on.
Yep.
And there's going to be days I can eat, days I can't eat. I'm just being honest with you. I'm probably going to skip some trainings here and there because things are just not good here.
Yeah.
I will literally, the piece of paper may say they require X calories, which to me is macros based on whatever protein, carbs, and fats that should be. So from a scientific perspective, if they were in a lab, it says they're supposed to have this. That's totally out the window with me. I'm now going to feed that human being who just shared their story with me on what their challenges may be within their lifestyle. And I'm going to over-engineer it or under-engineer it based on what I think they're going to be able to pull off and not. Meaning if I think they're going to probably be skipping 2 or 3 things through this or eating half the food, I'm going to over-engineer it so that if that happens, they're still covered on the backside because I've built it up at the predominance of the other meals that they will be able to get in. And I think that's what's so important is being able to take that type of human element and make the diet basically come alive for them. But a lot of that is, I think, through experience and understanding that not everybody can be a Brian Shaw.
Yep.
I can feed a Brian Shaw like I feed a Brian Shaw. Yep. But I could have your twin with a completely different lifestyle from you, and the diet numbers that say what each one of you should eat should align. But if I feed you based off of that, both of you will have drastically different results.
Yeah.
Based on all those environmental influences, if you will.
See, it's so fascinating because I would say that to a certain extent, training, you need to be able to account for real life factors, right? With training. And I've always talked about this, and a lot of people will come up with a perfect training plan, so to speak, right? Like you can map it out. It's all on paper. If you want to build it off percentages, however you want to go, right? But that doesn't account for the fact that you had a bad day. Maybe something happened in your relationship, something happened in your life. There's, you had a flat tire, you had this or that, right? Like there's a lot of things that can mess up a day. And when you walk in the gym, there's a certain assessment of readiness that as a especially as an athlete, but you need to be able to say, hey, I'm at this level of readiness for training, and therefore we might need to modify the training plan slightly so that today we get the most out of it. Mm-hmm. And it's such a fascinating thing to hear you talk about. And I think for me, it would be frustrating if I was saying, hey, here's your diet, and then it wasn't executed upon fully, right? Mm-hmm. But it's like to be able to hear a person and say like, hey, all right, what do you got going on? What's your personality like? I'm going to now try to mastermind this thing so that it accounts for who you are and what I think I'm going to get out of you to make you better, and that's such a tough thing because I'm sure that there are guys that would when they're talking about it, even talking to you, maybe say like, hey man, I've hit that 100%. Have they?
But,
right?
But they have, remember, because they've hit it based on how I engineered it, because I've over-engineered it to be ahead of that. I've anticipated us having this scenario together.
Got it. And then you would be able to tell if they're eating a little bit differently, and then maybe modify based on them
based on the progress,
being more compliant or less.
Yeah. And so like I'll have guys that'll be like, they'll tell me like, man, I missed this and I missed that, but I still had a great deadlift session. It's awesome. And then I had to go out of town, and then that unexpectedly dragged on another 2 days. But when I got back, I squatted, and it was awesome, man. And I think they either expect me to be mad at them or lecture them or say, I don't know. I am every single guy I have, they'll all tell you the same thing. I am unbelievably calm with the information that they recite to me.
Yeah.
Because there's a 90% chance that I already thought we might be in this situation together.
Sure.
And it's okay because of the way I have engineered your diet. I have already compensated with there's technically too much at this meal and technically too much at that meal for where I would normally put things. But I know that because you're going to probably miss this, skip that, or not be strict with that, it's going to balance for us. And so you're still going to be pushing forward in your progress.
See, I would, and this is just me, man. It's like if you sent something across, and I've told you this before, if it was 12 ounces cooked and that's what I'm supposed to eat,
you're 12.
I was 12.0. Yes. It wasn't even 12.1 or 11.9. That wasn't okay. It was, so it's such a fascinating thing to think about. But people are people, right? So it's like, how do those people interpret that? What are they okay with? Because I mean, truth be told, I'm sure shared this with you before, but I would have like going up to a contest, I had a report card basically that I did for myself. And so I needed to hit everything perfect down to, if it was water intake or my food intake, my recovery, my training, all of that needed to be perfect for that day. And then that was a check mark. But if I was off even a little bit, it wasn't okay. Right. So if I didn't get all my food done, but this could be that I missed by 1 ounce of something, right? Like that was not going to be all right. So that was technically a failure of that day because I didn't eat. If I was supposed to eat 12 and I ate 10, not okay, right? So I was close, but it wasn't, close was never good enough, right? Like it was just kind of the way that it worked for me. So it's hard. It would be hard for me with what you're saying to give stuff to people and know almost instinctually they're not going to follow it to a T, where that if they would follow it to a T, right, and just do exactly as I say, here you go, that you're going to get better. And that to me should click in their mind. Like, this is my plan. Like, for example, even any high performer, right? I'm an athlete. My performance is going to dictate potentially prize money, what I'm going to get paid, opportunities, all this different stuff. So why in the world would you not comply with that, right? But knowing and going in and saying, well, I've got this guy, and he's not going to comply. And I know that he's probably going to be a 60%, 70% guy. So I'm just going to build it up. And then hopefully on the back end, it'll work out. That's the mastermind of this. That's like fascinating to me, because in my head, it doesn't work. Like that is not okay with me, because if I'm working with a guy and he's only going to give me 60%, that's ridiculous, or 70%. That's not okay.
But picture it. So with it being engineered like that, and let's say I'm getting a 60%, 70% in return, if you will, even though I've over-engineered it to account for that. That's where kind of the magic happens, and why everybody's always really scratches their head, and why people always say, how come Payton's guys look like they can't hardly pick anything up, like in some of their training videos, or let's say in the qualifying rounds or something like that, but then they get progressively stronger as a contest goes on.
Just keep going.
Like, how come everybody starts to get more tired and gets a little bit weaker during contests? And like some of the guys that I have, you'll see them get stronger and stronger and stronger and stronger as a contest. It's the exact opposite. Yep. Well, what's happening? That 60, 70% that I had over-engineered to account for, it's becoming 80% while we're together through that contest. It's becoming 90%. So they're seeing, oh, wow, look look what happens when it's exactly as written.
Yeah, it's there.
So then it almost kicks in a turbo. So it's a fail safe to some degree, if you will, because they're going to be able to continuously move forward and making progress in their training and still be strong and having progress. But then as they're able to be more 80, 90, 100% Brian Shaw-ish, well, they're actually rewarding themselves with that increased performance and increased ability.
Yeah.
Just solely by tightening up.
And doing it better, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's such
but
a
always
fascinating
feeling successful.
Yeah.
Never feeling like I'm not good at dieting or I'm not good at following a diet. I always let my guys know you're doing it.
Yeah.
Because how I've engineered it, I've got those kind of checks and balances and stuff in there. And so they're doing what I need them to do. Could there be more? Could they do more? Could it be improved? Sure. But it's still just going to only amplify the results that they are going to still get, you know?
It's interesting.
Because I want to be that supportive. I think there's too much, I think it's unrealistic for a lot of individuals to have to be 100% with things.
Yep.
Either it's not their personality or their lifestyle really inhibits. And that's okay too. And I don't want guys to feel like they can't try or they can't pursue if they can't be 100, you know?
Yeah.
So it's ways of coaching people differently, and you're coaching to match each person.
Yep.
You know, I feel it's like I'm Sybil. I got 900 personalities, if you will.
Well,
I'm trying to match to everyone to get what they need from me.
Well, and I'm sure my response to this, and you know, I know this is it's a different thing, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm sitting here and saying it's absurd to hear that somebody would have a diet and they're only going to be a certain percentage compliant, right? Instead of 100%, because how is anything less than 100% acceptable, right? Like that's how I think.
Sure.
But, you know, going into it, it's, everybody's a little bit different. And I'm sure, you know, even you take a normal person, right? And we scale it down to that. A normal person just making simple, better choices, a few of them, could have a major impact, right? Mm-hmm. So I think that it's two different conversations to have when it comes to diet. And I know that you've worked with a wide array of different people. And you know, I think a lot of the conversation so far has been about me, top level performers, that type of thing. And that mindset, which is very drastically different than somebody else who just wants to be healthier, to play with their kids or be more active or, you know, extend their life potentially, like live healthier, that type of thing. And I think that, you know, kind of broad, you know, approach that you're talking about can apply to a lot of those types of people, which is really cool too.
Mm-hmm. It's, you want to empower somebody. There's so many, especially today, social media, there's so many brilliant people out there. There are so many guys with PhD in protein, guys that are just unbelievably brilliant and share a lot of incredible information with everyone. That can be overwhelming for a lot of folks because even though this incredible wealth of information is being shared with them from incredibly intelligent individuals who have a lot to offer, it's overwhelming. It's like, is their comprehension on the same level as what this individual's ability to recite information is? That's tough because you're coming from, like, you know, genius level, if you will, and then you're trying to grab bits and pieces out of that, you know, some of which is like it's just, you know, I'm not going to understand a heart surgeon or a brain surgeon's terms with what they're doing in there. They can tell me and I can kind of follow along, but it doesn't mean I should go like tap into somebody and try to do my own heart surgery the next day. You know? And it's that I think people either get overwhelmed and feel defeated because, wow, I can't do all that, or I have to do all that, or there's no way for me to have a positive change in my life. If it's a change to my health or a change to my physical appearance or a change to just quality of life, you know, whatever that person's goal may be, I think everybody should have the opportunity to better themselves, which, I mean, that's always been your thing. Be great. Mm-hmm. You're not talking about everybody go out there and win World's Strongest Man. Yep. You're not talking about everybody go out there and win Strongest Man on Earth or you know, win the Super Bowl. You're saying go out there and be great. Be great you. Yes. Be great at being you. You know, And that's the thing, is that certainly resonated with me all our time together. It's like, yep, that's spot on. You know, everybody deserves the chance, regardless of financial ability, regardless of personal situations or work situations or whatever they find themselves in.
Yeah.
Everybody does deserve that opportunity to be great themselves and to have some version that is to them that can apply.
Yeah.
You know, and so that's just always been so important for me to try to do that on so many levels.
Yeah. It's neat though, man. I mean, it's, you know, I think sometimes I have to step back and say like, okay, well, this is the way that I would approach it. So we start talking about diet, and especially at a high level of performance, that's just where I'm naturally going to go, right? Same thing with training, same thing with recovery, same thing with everything else, because that's what made sense to me. But again, bringing up, okay, that be great mentality. Well, I'm always going to try to hold myself to the highest standard that I possibly can. That's just who I am. That's what I'm about. But also within that, I understand that there are a lot of different people out there from a lot of different backgrounds and a lot of different circumstances. And for all those people, if they could take anything away from that and say, well, I'm just going to make one choice today to get better, right? But if you do one small thing each day to get better, well, now guess what? You're on your own path to greatness too, right? Like you're making strides in the right direction, and that's what it's all about. And it's the same, you know, in a way for me, it was always the cumulative effect of the choices that I was making on a daily basis to get better, right? So everything was about getting better. And you know, certain days it was a little bit more of a grind and it was harder. And other days it came pretty easy and it was like, hey, this is all clicking, it's all working. But it's always that thought process, the pattern of those choices, which are building positive momentum, everything's moving forward. And so, you know, I think that it's important to say those things when it comes to your approach to diet, because diet is, and we've talked about this before, in the bigger scope of things, I always said to people, well, I would train for a certain amount of period during the day, but I'm certainly not training all day. Right. I'm going in the gym for, you know, maybe it's a really focused couple hours, you know, something like that. You know, I mean, I played with different things where I was doing morning sessions or 2 a day type of things. And, you know, I pretty much always came back to like one focused hard session was the right way for me to do it. You know, it was the approach, like it wasn't that I didn't experiment with some different things. And then when I did, we would split the diet up and plug in different things too. You know, and my, you know, schedule has changed and a lot of that, but it, you know, just something that comes back to always like making the right choice, just in the moments where people aren't looking. What choices are you making? And when I train 2 hours a day, I'm eating from morning till night, right? The whole day. There's a lot of food choices. And a lot of times, you know, if you were to ever tell somebody, hey, just write down every single thing that goes in your mouth for a whole day, right? A lot of people don't even realize, well, this little snack or this thing, man, I'm doing that 6 times a day. And that's adding up to a lot of extra here or there. And so you can make a lot of changes just by starting small. Right. Just by starting small. And that's really like, it can make a massive impact. Right. And a lot of people I think get, you know, and I'm not wanting people to necessarily sit here and say, well, if I can't be perfect to the level like, oh, Brian, you're crazy with your mindset, this is perfect. If I can't be perfect, I'm not even going to try to start. Right. Because the other thing that I will say is, as we work together, you know, back in 2011, I mean, yes, I was doing some things, but my existence pretty much was make sure I sleep enough, make sure I eat, and make sure I train. Absolutely. Right. And I was trying to do, you know, some different small business things, but I mean, I would basically, for the most part, be able to wake up, think about my training, think about what I was going to train, eat. I was hydrating. I was doing all these different things. And I was just looking forward to when I could train. Right. And I mean, yes, I'm simplifying that a little bit, but basically that's what it was, right? And then as things got added for me over the years where it's, okay, now I, am getting married, we're having kids, I've got different businesses that are growing and we're starting more business and we're bringing on a whole list of other commitments.
Right.
Now my schedule is completely different where it's like, well, I've got to get to bed here because if I don't get to bed here, I'm not going to sleep enough and I have to get up for this and I've got to do that. And you're being pulled in all these different directions, right? So what you're saying about the diet, and I would always talk to you about, okay, what is it? What is the training schedule? And then what is the life schedule? And that's where we really had to start talking more to make sure that I could fit it in and where I could fit it in and how it would work easily for me. Right. And I think that's a cool part of a lot of the things that we started to do was fitting it into my lifestyle as I got more and more busy. Mm-hmm. And then it was like, all right, cool. Well, here's some options. Here's different options that you can plug in. And I'm on the road. I'm going to this meeting. I have this going on, whatever it is. But I know that for this, time period, I can eat, and this is going to be easy for me to plug in and do. And then I always had choices as well of what I could potentially eat, right? So it was, I could, even within the diet, I had some flexibility, some variety where, you know how it is. Certain days you wake up and it's like, well, if I'm really in love with chicken, like you said, we're both not, like, or maybe for me, it's bison, right? Like, it's like maybe today, well, I don't know that world exists where I don't want to eat bison, but it's like maybe today I don't want to eat that, right? So we're going to plug in something different. So those options were always there for me. And then, the structure of what I was trying to do, the goals I was trying to go after, because it was after, I guess for us, it was like kind of like after 2017. 2017 was when I was at my biggest, strongest, that was what the sport was, right?
The scale said, what is this for the Arnold?
Oh man. Yeah. I mean, I
wouldn't read any higher.
No, it wouldn't.
460-ish was the top, and it.
Yeah. I think I was probably, between 460 and 470, mm-hmm. like somewhere in there mm-hmm. is like the top end. And I was, there's some things, I mean, you look at like, 2017 World's Strongest Man with that squat, for example, it was ridiculous, yep. And that's where, okay, and there's rules that were, and that's one where I ran out of time with that squat, for example, which, potentially could have changed the whole outcome of that contest. But
because you clearly could have gone all day.
It was easy.
All day.
And I trained for that.
I know.
That's the crazy part. And it was on me. It literally said in the rules 60 seconds. So I should have said, hey, I know in my training I can squat longer than 60 seconds because I've done it. And everyone was a pause. Mm-hmm. Pause, up, pause, like a machine. Mm-hmm. Pause, take a breath, squat, pause, up. Like I had trained that again, like a machine. But, that was, the biggest weights were, I mean, you can argue whatever. Like of course, max lifts still happen in this type of thing now, but it was just different, man. It was different with the weights, the loads. Like you look at the Arnold in 2017, the first two events of that contest that day were a 1,565 pound yoke,
right,
and an 1,140 pound frame carry with straps up a ramp.
Yep.
That's how you started that day one, mm-hmm. right? And then from there, you had to compete the next day, right? So it's like these crazy loads on the body, right? But that's what it was. And it was, okay, cool, right? Like I walk out, won those first two events, and it's just like, I mean, that contest.
I think you won the first three.
Yeah,
actually, technically, didn't you? 1,
yeah,
2, and 3.
Yeah, I dropped 2.5 points that whole contest.
Which was event 4, I think.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It was, but there was not a lot.
No, it was crushed.
Yeah. So I think it was maybe out of 4 out of 5,
yeah.
1, 4, but it was like that. But that was my game, man. Like and this is what I think, got frustrating for me within the sport is I was all about like, if somebody can't pick it up and move it, that's what I want. I want the heaviest weight you can put in front of us. And some people may disagree with that, which is totally fine. But if you can definitively look at an event and say, this guy is stronger than that guy, that's what you want, right? Mm-hmm. So it's like, where is that top end? And I guess that's a debate that you could have in a lot of different ways, right? Like what's the perfect strongman contest? And, if everybody's coming out there like with that bale toad and they can't even move it or can't pick it up or whatever, is it too heavy? Potentially. But then if somebody can pick it up and move it easily, then where is that level of strength, right? So it's kind of a unique one. But, I know that for me, after things kind of shifted, after 2017 and everything just kind of went towards the lighter side, like that's, and I can honestly say it frustrated me, but also like it was just hard for me because I wanted it to be about strength and I wanted it to be about who's stronger. And it's tough when you're running around with lighter weights and just not, I'm adapting into something that I don't agree with. And I think I fought that a little bit, where it's like, I don't agree with this because the weight should be heavier. And then I don't want to necessarily, whatever you want to call it, downsize, not be as strong and as big, like going into these events. I want it to still be definitive, like who's stronger. And for some of the events, you could argue that, like, in 2018 or whatever, like some of those events were way lighter. Like they were just way lighter, and it was a whole different animal that, maybe, and people could probably look at me and say, well, you should have just rolled with it better and adapted better or whatever it might have been. Same thing in 19 and 20 to a certain extent. But it's a different thing that we had to kind of rebuild in a way that it just kind of shifted, and why or how that happened, just did, right? Like, and I think that I'm thankful in a lot of ways, because like you said, it was like, myself, some of those guys were like the guinea pigs of like what's humanly possible. And I liked trailblazing that path, right? Like I liked thinking that something was possible, that we could do it, that it was something that was achievable. And, now will we get to, different weights? And you could argue it with the deadlift that are, some of the guys are going after, like, oh, well, that's a weight that hasn't been lifted. Sure, that's true. Like it's still potentially there, but it's transferring through all these other events the way that it was. So it's like, you go to certain contests and maybe the log is heavier than ever, the dumbbell's heavier than ever, the yoke is heavier than ever, the frame is heavier. Like that type of thing is, when you have every single event, like you said, is a new, never been done type of thing, that's a different animal to approach.
Mm-hmm. It's a different animal. But there's also that facet of not only what can someone do, but at the end of the day, you guys, and again, maybe it's stuck in my brain from how I was introduced to the sport with my dad being a child. You guys are intended. I think anybody at the top level of strongman, I think once you're a professional strongman, you're at the top. I think anything that you guys do should represent to kids the way it was when I was a kid watching it on TV, where you guys were real life superheroes. Mm-hmm. I could not go in a gym, let's say when I was a teenager, I could not go in a gym and see anybody do anything like what I was seeing on World's Strongest Man with what was going on. And that's when the weights were much lighter even back then, but still it was highly unusual in the plane poles and stuff. I mean, you're not going to see that down the street.
Just absurd. Yeah.
But I feel that it's kind of like a magician, right? Like a magician is incredible. And no matter how amazing they are at their craft and their skill, and you stare at them and you just can't figure out how the hell did Chris Angel or whomever just pull this off.
Yeah.
But the second the guy in the front row can stand up and go, watch this, and he can do something pretty similar. Yep. And then another comedian comes out on the stage and he does something pretty similar.
Yeah.
It's like once you pull that curtain back a little bit and you make it really accessible to all.
Yeah.
I think you're minimizing and you're removing that awe aspect of that superhero. And I think that is something that is a very dangerous, slippery slope to do for the sport. I think that all of you guys, I don't think there's a single professional strongman around the world who does not agree with that statement that they view themselves as a superhero. Yeah. Not egotistical, but they view themselves as a superhero. They know damn good and well, I'm able to do some things that is really not normal.
Yeah.
And there should be tremendous pride with that. You know?
Absolutely.
And that should then be pushed so that each of those individuals can fully display how much of a superhero they really are.
Sure.
As opposed to you turn on the TV or something and there's an event that takes place and I can see the local strongman group and, you know, who are aspiring to be professionals, but that's a ladder you've got to walk up and achieve.
Yep.
You shouldn't be an aspiring strongman, you know, loading 500-pound stones. You know, you should be an aspiring strongman who's doing, you know, what is applicable for aspiring, say 350 pounds or whatever that case may be. And I think if a contest that I can turn on the TV shows a 350-pound stone, I'm just using a stone as an example.
Yeah.
And now I can see that in the gym. Now I can see that at the local strongman group training. I think it's an insult to every professional strongman out there.
Yep.
Because they are not the same. A professional strongman has made so many sacrifices in his life with the training and the time away from family, the time away from job, the investment, the money, the injuries that are going to happen. That's just par for the course.
Yes.
I kind of think, how dare you minimize all the sacrifices I have made to be a pro strongman and make it to where it looks like these are all the kind of things that I can just see on any weekend or I can watch a guy do in the gym next to me.
Well, it's tough. And you know what I'm saying? I think it's, you know, we're talking about my period and us working together and kind of doing the impossible, right? Like these events. And I love that. I thrived on that, like I said. And I will always say that. Like I loved when it was like, holy cow, look at the weight of this. That's going to be insane. Like here's this training and I've got to go every week and get ready to do these crazy, crazy things. And then the sport shifted. And I've talked a lot about that. And I don't think it's not the athlete's fault, right? Like the athletes aren't choosing the events or the weights or whatever. They can only compete against the events that are there, the weights that are there, the competitors that are there. And that's the natural, it's kind of the natural evolution of it, right? So it's not that the guys aren't potentially capable of the bigger weights. It's not that at all. It's just they haven't necessarily had that in front of them because they haven't had a 1,500 plus pound yoke put in front of them or whatever some of these other like crazy weights are. It's just, you know, they have gotten, you know, potentially used to or more acclimated to the contest and some of the weights. And, you know, a lot of the guys are competing more now than I did for sure. And it wasn't that I didn't have the opportunities to compete. I was just super selective about what I was going to do because I love the journey to get to these crazy things, right? So like I was perfectly fine saying, hey, I'm going to focus on the biggest contests, maybe trickle in one or two other ones. And then that's how I'm going to go. But I also learned that certainly from myself, but also from other guys saying, hey, they were older than me. What would you have done a little bit different? And a lot of them said, either maybe I would have changed my training a little bit or I would have competed a little bit less or been more strategic. And to be fair, I think Phil Pfister might have been the guy that said to me, he's like, Brian, look, like once you get to the level where you can focus on the top two biggest contests, focus on that. That's what, you know, people are going to ultimately remember as the biggest events on the biggest stages against all the best guys. And I was like, well, that makes sense. And it's also going to help me to have a longer career, right? Where I'm not beating myself up at all these other contests. And I saw it play out, right? Like I saw a lot of guys that, you know, for whatever reason, they competed a lot more. And over in Europe, to be fair, it's a lot easier because a lot of the Champions League stuff that was happening back then, it was a short flight, maybe an hour flight, 2 hour flight, whatever. They could go do it. It was like pretty much training weights. It was like a training contest they could do. So it was very easy to do more events where it was, you're not getting it out of first gear really potentially. And so, you know, things just kind of changed and evolved. And, you know, I can, I guess, talk about like what all the choices I made and why I made them. And, you know, everything was well thought out. But I think with what now, like taking it kind of full circle, what I'm trying to do with Strongest Man on Earth is provide that stage for these guys where there is a definitive, this man is the strongest, right? We're going to go over 8 events, which in all fairness, I didn't get to do. I didn't get to have an 8-event contest. I would have loved it. And I would have loved nothing more than that. Like, especially with Zadrunas and myself, some of the other guys, like being able to battle over 8 events where there's no way to run or hide from anything. If you have a weakness that's going to get exposed, I would have loved that. Right. So it's also just taking the bull by the horns and saying, hey, we're going to do this and we're going to try to set the stage for these guys. And now they will get the opportunity to maybe go after some of these bigger weights that they don't see at other contests. And that's exciting, right? Like that's really exciting to me because that's a stage that we can provide for them and an opportunity, for them to shine, right? And be the superhero, be these guys and put on a show, man, because a lot of these guys, like I said, I think sometimes maybe, people hear me say things about, well, it changed after 2017 or things were a little bit different or whatever. Maybe I didn't like it as much. We can shift that back and give them that opportunity where hopefully someday they're talking about the fact that, man, I got an opportunity to lift a 600-pound stone, or I got an opportunity to do these crazy things at this contest that were the obscure thing that people look at and say, wow, right? Like that's strongman. That's what you want. You want the reaction of the kids and the people and everybody just to say, holy cow, look at that, right? And that's ultimately what I'm trying to do, is bring that wow factor back, but then also have a very, very legitimate stage for these guys to prove and put on display how strong they are, because the guys now are incredible, right? Like nothing I'm saying. And I think that sometimes when guys walk away from the sport, and I've heard it before, they'll talk about, well, my generation, this generation, whatever. Like the fact is yes, are there different generations? Sure. Are the events changing? I mean, you could go back to the 90s and say, well, man, the weights were really light in the 90s, but that's just what they were doing. They didn't know anything different, right? So it's a fascinating conversation.
That was the top end of human ability in the 90s, basically.
Yeah.
And thus had your era then not began the time period of let's push the boundaries and not circusy. And I don't mean that in a bad way whatsoever, but I mean, let's damn near scare people with what we're about to ask someone to do. Right.
Yeah. Yep.
Like you're looking at that and you're nervous, literally in the audience, like, holy, like, is this going to crush somebody? Like there's that whoa factor, but it's like, had somebody not tested that, I mean, we might still be doing the 90s, which was not that there's any part of that either. But that was what was considered, that's the top of what we can do. And then as you saw, it's pushed and then it's pushed and it's pushed and it's pushed. And then you end up with, like you said, now you have these athletes today who I feel have been able to kind of merge the best of everything into what influences them, right? So they have that 80s, 90s, if they go back and they kind of go the historian route and they check out some of those. And then they have, the 2000s and they kind of merge all these areas. If they're able to take all these influences, you guys saved them the hassle of having to be that trailblazer.
Yeah.
you did it, like, well, here's kind of the extreme upper end.
Yep.
And then they have what was previous, and they're able to kind of merge all of those together. And I think you end up with like you said, incredible athletes that are out there today doing amazing things that in the 80s or 90s, any one of those lifts would be considered, nobody can do that.
Yep.
But yet here they are doing it. It's because it's being pushed at times it's pushed, and thus we find out what the new thing is capable, and then everything is just kind of designed around the athletes and what the athletes display is possible. Yeah, this group of 10 guys, 15 guys, 16 guys, whatever it is, this is possible for them in today's era, and then the next era might be something entirely different,
Sure.
And it's just interesting because the human body continues to evolve, and it evolves through education. It evolves through awareness and people just taking knowledge from everywhere. But at the end of the day, that knowledge doesn't come from a textbook. That knowledge doesn't come from the latest study that says, this herb or this supplement or this whatever is going to do the work for you.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, you have to put that into reality and put it into use and execute and actually come through with your part as the athlete. So it's just incredible that it seems to be a far more willing, just awareness on continuing to absorb as much knowledge as possible and experiment with the self, if you will, on, hey, what am I capable of? What am I not capable of?
Yeah. And everybody paves the path, right? Like all the guys in the, 70s, 80s, 90s, even before that, potentially, everybody's kind of played their role, right? And I think that's where, if you respect the history, which I definitely do, you could go back and say, well, hey, if some of the guys in the 90s, for example, or 80s, if they would be challenged with stuff that's done now, and you were transplanting them in a different era, how would they do? Right. Mm-hmm. And these are things that you could also do for the sport of basketball, for example, right? Thing. Like you could say, well, hey, let's give some of those older guys that, again, were the trailblazers. Let's put them into the game today. Let them train like the guys do now, and all the advancements, everything that's happened. Can you say definitively that some of those guys couldn't be super successful? Probably not. Mm-hmm. The game was just different, right? So the strongman is kind of like this. It's like this ebb and flow of what is it, and then you go through these periods for whatever reason where it's like it's heavier, and then maybe it does get a little bit lighter or faster. The guys are a little bit more athletic. They're kind of merging everything together. Is that right or wrong? I think there's a way, in my opinion, would be as you could put it together in a perfect balance where you truly are finding out the strongest, because I don't think you can shift too far away from that truth, is that we have to find out who the strongest is, right? Mm-hmm. And there's a whole host of different contests, but I think through my experience and just the way that I think is, I would hope that the guys someday are going to look back and say, wow, we had this stage with Strongest Man on Earth that was special, right? It was different than any other contest because of the way the events were set up, the way the contest was ran, the way that we were treated, the whole, everything, all of it. And they get to kind of have that, because I had it for, I would say, a couple years 1 year for me with Fortissimus. And it's like, hey, it's this 10 event contest, nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. It's crazy. And big weights. Some of the stuff was, at that point at least, was like, wow, this is brutal. Mm-hmm. And you walk out of it, but it was a kind of a decathlon of strength, right? Like you're just doing that. And then that contest went away. And now it's kind of forming an opinion over an entire career of what the right way to test strength is. And then also how to give these incredible athletes a platform and a stage to be successful and to put their strength on display. And I think that's the neat part of it, is when you look at that, like, the different role. And I think you and I could talk forever about different things, but it's like this performance package that was put together with all the nutrition, all the training, all the mindset, like everything that goes into it. And it's a neat deal, right? Because there's certain aspects of strength history that were carved and put into place, like, through those times. And it was neat, man. It was, and who knows, right? Like if things would have kept climbing from 2017, where is the top end, right? Like would that yoke have got to 2,000 pounds? Would that be too much? Where is too much, right? And like, it's kind of this shift of, okay, the weights are coming back, but it's such a fascinating thing to talk about, because I think when you challenge the athletes, and I think that's probably the mindset that some of those people had when they were writing the event. So like, let's just put it out there, because the guys seem to step up when they're challenged with different things, right? Mm-hmm. So I think that those challenges can come, and then the athletes will step up, the athletes will perform. And I think that now that's what I'm probably the most interested in, it is like seeing the guys be able to perform and have that stage. And I think that's what's exciting to me, right? Like to be able to come kind of full circle through my whole career, come back to it. All right, now the stage is set, like in a different way, right? Like using that knowledge that was gained and the correct way to put together a really, really great strongman contest. and give these guys that stage, right? Like, and I think that's what it's got to be about is coming back to that and saying like, all right, well, this is what I think is the stage, and we're going to put it out there, and then the guys will perform, right? Mm-hmm. Kind of like if you build it, they will come kind of thing.
Exactly.
Right? Like they'll show up, right? And I think that, these discussions can be had about what weights are being lifted now, or why are they being lifted that way, or like, why are the numbers different, or whatever? Why are some of the numbers higher? Why are some lower? Like some of these things it's a pretty fascinating conversation when you dig into it.
Well, strongman athletes just in general, I talked about that at dinner last night, I hate that whole built different, he's different, but it is so true with strongman athletes. It is such an interesting combination of personality in the sense that by and large, they're all very funny, prankster, jokester, upbeat, like the most enjoyable amount of people you could ever hope to be around.
Yeah.
There is very little negativity. There just really is when it comes to the athletes themselves and how they communicate and just how they are when you're around them in the training and stuff like that. They have just a different mindset on how they view things, which is that same thing where I just think that they also, because they have those personalities, I think, it's like you said, if they build it, they will come, or if you challenge them, they will rise.
Yeah. That's a good
and
way
I
to put
think
it.
they embrace that. I mean, I've never been around any of my athletes at any level, be it amateurs, be it in any sport really, but especially obviously with the strength-based things. I've never had any athlete express like an intimidation over an event, or express a fear, or now everybody has their own, they love, a deadlift, or they love a log, or they love a circus dumbbell, or they love a fingers, they all have certain things that they really love and enjoy, but I've never had an athlete come to me and express some sort of fear or whatever over any weight that was set, regardless of how high it was.
Yeah.
It's always embraced as a challenge, and they, more than anyone, are incredibly curious to see, can they do it?
Yes.
And it's just an incredibly different group of human beings that are unique and like no other, I don't feel. Yeah. And it definitely, I think there's an example there that can be set for a lot of different sports, for a lot of different people, who are going through challenges. Like sometimes it's not good to fear a challenge. Sometimes it's not good to hide. Sometimes it's not good to kind of be in the background from things that make you uncomfortable. Sometimes it's really good to meet them head on. And sometimes it's really good to embrace that challenge and see what you're made of. Mm. And then I think you emerge from that a whole other person on the other side that benefits you from any aspect of life.
Yeah. You put your back against the wall, right? Mm-hmm. And you figure out, that, and that's what all these guys, I mean, they wouldn't be on that stage if they weren't comfortable with that. They wouldn't. Mm. That's just the truth. And any high level performer has to be willing to fail. And they have to understand that failure is potentially there. Right. You're either going to succeed or fail, and that's a very real thing for some people, and some people can't deal with that. So for these guys, I'm not surprised to hear you say that you put something out there and they're like, all right, let's figure it out, right? This is going to be good. I mean, because if their immediate response was, nope, no way, not going to happen, they're already defeated, right? Like there's no way that you would be able to overcome that type of mindset. So,
well, unfortunately, I think the public tends to speak for the guys.
Yeah.
Completely erroneously. I think the public speaks for, oh, well, so-and-so wouldn't like that event. So-and-so wouldn't like this event. So-and-so, that's unfair to them because of this event. You know what? If you were to ask so-and-so about that event that you, the public, are saying is unfair to them, because that guy will tell you to shut the hell up. He can't wait to prove you wrong.
Sure.
That's what these athletes, the mindset is. Yeah. And I think sometimes the public misses the mark on what the mindset of these guys are. Absolutely support them. Absolutely root for your favorite guys. Yeah. Absolutely have your biases, if you will. That's called being a fan of any sport.
Yeah.
But don't sell any of these guys short on what you think they will like, won't like, can do, can't do, because not a single one of those guys would run from a challenge, they'll
Which is
all
great.
embrace it, right?
Yeah. See, it's exciting to hear, man. And I think what you have is a fan base that's more in tune with what the contests are. They watch these guys and know, who's potentially good at whatever. And then, they'll see a set of events and, I guess depending on the contest, you could argue one way or the other. But if it's a fair set of events, most of the guys, even if they have a weaker event in that lineup, they're going to attack it.
Exactly.
Right? They're going to go after it. And, it's much like I would think is, hey, in a lot of ways, like if you want to find a weak event for me, I'm going to figure out how to get better at it. And then I'll walk out there and do well. Mm-hmm. Right. And then it's like all of a sudden, well, I guess Brian's good at everything now. Like, that was what I wanted. I wanted people to say, well, you can't find a bad event. Mm-hmm. You're not going to find a bad event. There's every single event I can do well at. And so you can put together any contest, any combination of whatever, doesn't matter. You know? And I think that a lot of the guys would go after that same type of thing. And that's the challenge, right? Ultimately, that's the challenge with strongman is being good at everything.
And getting better at what you're not.
Yeah, it's beautiful. So where do you see nutrition going, like in the future here with the guys that you work with now, with the sport? And again, we're talking strongman, but you work with a lot of different athletes as well. Like for yourself, like, where do you see things going with that?
For myself and from my point of view, I see at least anything that I'm involved with. I see that the direction of an emphasis being put on an individual more than on the diet. And what I mean is I don't want somebody to have I'm not saying that people need the Nathan Payton diet. I'm not saying that that's the be all end all or that's the only answer to anything. I'm saying that if someone hires me or if I work with someone, they're not getting the Nathan Payton diet. They're getting Nathan Payton's analysis of the best direction for them.
Yeah.
And that might be a whole slew of different approaches, high carb, high fat, low fat, combination of everything. It's depending on what my analysis of you is and what, through all my experience and the track record, if you will, what that then determines that I go with for you. And so it's about the success and the individual. And so for the masses, how that spreads out is I would love to see individuals place their number one priority and emphasis on their lifestyle. And then whatever diet approach they choose to go, first and foremost, it being all about their lifestyle and not all about the name of the diet or the kind of the diet. Because at the end of the day, that name of the diet or that type of diet may not align at all with your lifestyle. And you are doomed to failure in this lifetime with any time you have to overhaul your lifestyle to make a diet work or overhaul your lifestyle to make any pursuit you have work. It doesn't matter if you're a musician. If you have to overhaul your lifestyle, no longer spend time with the kids, the family, and do anything you're supposed to, and you start missing work half the time so that you can practice guitar, that's probably not going to last very long because it's unrealistic. However, if you can weave in when you practice guitar that matches your lifestyle, well, the kids go to bed or, while the wife takes them grocery shopping or whatever, if you can make anything in life be designed around your lifestyle rather than having to overhaul that, you're going to be successful because it's not foreign to you. The moment something is foreign or obtrusive, you are doomed to fail because you're basically on a sinking ship and you're going to hang on to that boat as long as you can, as long as it stays above water. But at some point it's going to go underwater because your lifestyle is going to reign supreme and eventually dominate that pursuit.
Yep.
And so I hope nutrition goes down the road and people stop arguing over what diet is best, what manner of dieting, what just anything. I hope that all just stops because you're sending people down the wrong path and you're making people focus on the things they shouldn't focus on. I feel any diet will work. I feel any diet will make you better than tomorrow than you are today. I feel where that diet was going to fail is the second that your lifestyle does
Doesn't
not
fit with that.
align.
Yeah.
And so I would love to see a focus put on nutrition, not on that, food or diet, but on that person's lifestyle, and just how they can pick and choose things that are based on some sort of design with a health basis or a performance basis, body change basis, whatever their goal is.
Yep.
But it fits like a glove on their lifestyle. And so they are just going about their life in every single capacity of what it entails and making their food selections just flow right with that.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, speaking of that, in general, we're out here kind of working on an exciting project together, which will be coming up. So it's a Shaw Elite app, and that's going to include a lot of the things that you're talking about, where an individual will be able to get into that fully custom app, make all the selections. It'll all be right there for them when it comes to, their diet, their training, their mindset. Like, we're trying to put a lot of really neat stuff. And I think that all of the stuff that you're saying right now and that we have talked about, for people, there's a certain wall that they will put up and a barrier to entry when it comes to, well, I have a busy life, right? I have a busy life. I can't follow a diet because I have a busy life, or it's just not going to work for me. I'm going to fail with it. And so they'll immediately come up with these things that for them are the reasons that it won't work, right? Whereas everything, that I have kind of said, where, my evolution, if you look at it from being able to have all the time pretty much in the world to do whatever I wanted, to being unbelievably busy, where I was so confined by my schedule and what I could do, and we still could make it work, right? Like, but it always was fitting into my schedule. Like, with this app that we're doing, what I'm so excited about it is it's going to provide people that platform and guidance where they can make the food choices. It's all going to be right there. You're going to be able to sub things in and out. It's this, essentially an extension of Nathan Payton, although working with you individually is always going to be, that's going to be that cream of the crop, right?
It's a different tier.
It doesn't get better than that. But like for everybody else coming in, they're going to have access to that, and then they're going to be able to select foods that they like. They're not going to be force-fed things that they don't like. And then within it, they're going to be able to tailor it. So it's a lot of exciting stuff. I mean, I'm very, very excited for people to experience it, and having you on board with that, man, is going to be so, so cool, because this knowledge base, that you bring in is bar none. Like, this experience is just so cool, because not only have you worked with top level athletes, you've worked with so many different types of people and so many, professions and where they're not even athletes, but they're just a person that's trying to improve themselves. Like, so, and that's where we're going to go with the app too, is with the training side, with the diet side, with the mindset, like everything from somebody just simply trying to make small changes with their life to get better, all the way up to somebody who's trying to strive to be the absolute best at whatever they do, right? Like, and that's the neat part of it. So I'm pumped, man. I mean, like, all the knowledge that you've been sharing, not only here, but also, within that, is so, so great.
It's all, both sides, like you said, with the training, with the nutrition, with everything. It's, like I said, I don't think there's not an individual out there. So I'm not even going to say I don't think. I'm going to declare there's not a single person out there that would ever be able to say, I heard Nathan say whatever style diet sucks or is wrong. You can put anybody's name and say this person's diet, that person's diet, whatever. There's not a single individual out there that's ever heard me say, well, that's wrong and they should do it my way. That doesn't exist, because I don't believe that. I believe any diet that fits within the fabric of your lifestyle is 100% successful. It's just that's where the downfall always is that it's not designed from the inside out, meaning from the lifestyle out. It's designed from the outside in. Well, that's like you trying to tell your neighbor what it's like in their house and what goes on in their house. You're not in there. It's an outsider's perspective, which is never going to be the same. And only you know what your life entails. And so having these items, that individuals If they want to cook, they cook. If they don't want to cook, they don't have to cook. If they need something fast, they've got it. If they want something and, make a nice long evening slow cook out of it, they can. It's not the kind of thing where they have to sit there and try to figure out like, well, again, kind of what I said about all these other diets. It's not about declaring the best diet. It's about me putting a bunch of food choices out there, and then the individual within their lifestyle can choose to make a good decision for their diet, a better decision for their diet, or the best decision for their diet. Meaning there's going to be varying levels of, some are more convenience based. Well, that's a good choice because it's lining up with your lifestyle. And then there's some that, well, this is a healthy one. I'm able to go ahead and make this and get this knocked out. That's a better choice. And then there's the best. And then the best choice that you, the individual, can make, if it aligns with your lifestyle, is going to be where you're able to get the high micronutrients, the high macronutrients as a focus. But that doesn't apply to everyone or mean that that would work for everybody's lifestyle. So you as the individual can choose good, better, best. You can choose good, better, best from meal to meal throughout your day, whatever your lifestyle chooses. And I think that's the thing, it's just solely an approach that is about your lifestyle. Because I don't want anybody to feel like they can't be successful.
No, and it's such a good way to put it, man. And it's kind of bringing it full circle, right? Because you talk about like high performance and all of this, and making good choices every single day, and every single person out there. I think every single person out there should be striving for that within themselves, to make better choices every single day, and to improve. Right? Like we all want to improve. Everybody should want to improve when you wake up. It's like, hey, but the sum of all those choices and everything with making this work, we're trying to make it convenient for people. And ultimately the whole goal of this entire app is to give people that tool to be better. Right. And I think that's what, because at the end of the day, you could do it in a much simpler way if we didn't care about it, right? Like it would be an easy, hey, here's this app platform, we plug and play with something else, where this is a completely custom built, custom done deal that's going to cater to all these people coming in. And I think that's what's so important, is to give them that, because ultimately, just like you, I want to see people be successful, right? Like that's the most rewarding thing in life, is for people to be successful and to improve on themselves, no matter what their goal is, right? It doesn't matter what their goal is, what they're trying to go after. And maybe something like this could even inspire people to set a new goal and say like, hey, I can do this. Like I'm starting to build some confidence in myself. I'm making these small changes and stacking bricks, which you'll figure out within the app as well. But it's going to be neat, man. It's going to be really, really neat. And I think it's something that, like, as we talk about it more, for people listening, you'll be able to find it on Instagram right now is probably the best place. It's the Shaw Elite app. You can follow on there, and we'll be putting out more stuff as we get closer to that. But the goal is before the end of 2024 here. So getting strong into 2025. But man, I feel like we could probably keep going and just
easily
hitting on topics. But I appreciate you being here, man. And for anybody that's listening, if you go on Instagram, it's Pro Body Coach. You can find Nathan on there, and it's probodycoach.com, right?
Or nathanpayton.com, either or.
nathanpayton.com. So they'll both go to your website. So if you want to learn more about Nathan, contact him about anything, you can definitely, follow those routes and find him on there. So I appreciate it, man.
Awesome. My pleasure. Thank you, B.
Absolutely. If you enjoyed this podcast episode and would like to listen to another, click right here. And to stay informed about new podcast episodes, click here to subscribe.